Well, good morning and Shabbat Shalom. This is Valley Beth Shalom Torah study for a Shabbos morning. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein, and this morning joined for a welcome back, a welcome home to Rabbi Sherre Hirsch of the American Jewish University. Rabbi Sherre, it's great to see you. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.
Shana Tova, Shabbat Shalom. I'm so happy to be back, Eddie. It has been far too long, and I thank you for having me back.
Oh, it's a delight. And we both of us want to wish our dear friend, Rabbi Mark Gelman, a happy, healthy, sweet New Year. Rabbi Gelman is still today up in the trees of Aspen, meditating on the meaning of this new year and the meaning of the holiday. And I'm hoping that he'll be back with us soon.
That's a tough gig.
It's a wonderful place. It's a wonderful place. So welcome back. It's a delight to have you back. Yontif is coming. Tonight is Selichot. Selichot is the service traditionally prayed in Ashkenazi communities on the Saturday night preceding Rosh Hashanah. And then, of course, Yontif is just a week or so from tonight. So we're all getting ready. Let's talk about Selichot and let's talk about getting ready for the holiday. Well, tell me, when you think of this Slicha, I remember as being a kid, my father would take me, it was at midnight or so. He'd wake me up and tell me to get dressed, and he'd take me to shul. And it was this quiet little service, a dozen or so, mostly of the older members of the synagogue. And there was a great deal of feeling in the room, a great deal of anticipation, anxiety about the coming of the new year, a great deal of fervent prayer about the coming of the new year. That's my impression as a kid growing up. And then as I got older, I began to understand something more about this holiday, this very special holiday moment, because it's very rare in Jewish life do we wake up at midnight and do anything. So talk to us about Selichot. What is Selichot?
It's funny that you said that, because I feel like there's these three holidays in Judaism that have this mystical quality to them. One is Selichot, because you get up in the middle of the night and you hear these prayers that have this sort of certain tone to them, and it's dark and everybody's a little sleepy. The second is Tisha B'Av, where you sit on the low stools and it's dark and the candles are burning. It's got that same sort of mystical quality. And then the third is Shavuot. If you stay up all night and you're with people learning at 2 a.m. and you're in sort of the darkness and the quiet, all three of them have not only that mystical quality, but also it's sort of the hardcore Jews, right? Like, it's the people that aren't like, are you fasting on Yom Kippur? It's like they're beyond that. This is sort of the core. This is the center. This is like the essence of the people that take this very seriously, because they're not afraid to be up in the middle of the night and in the darkness trying to search for the light.
So let's talk about that for a moment. Our old friend Rabbi Wolpe once wrote in one of his books that the nighttime is a time for truths that we can't face or can't articulate during the day. It's the kinds of things we think about while we're lying in bed if we can't sleep, and the kind of truths we encounter are there's some ways deeper truth that might be difficult to see in the light. We can see in the dark. So tell me, why Selichot is at night, and what's the special kind of truth that comes out at this midnight service?
Well, I think you nailed it on the head. I think there's a rawness that comes at night. It's sort of like you unclothe yourself, you get in your pajamas, right? Or not, and you're sort of naked. And I don't know about you, but I wake up in the middle of the night, and not just to go to the bathroom, but my whole life wake up in the middle of the night. I fall asleep in an instant, but I wake up in the middle of the night to think, because it's quiet, because nobody's interrupting me, because I don't have 5 children talking to me, right? And there's something, I think Selichot allows us to be vulnerable and exposed in a way that's in like nothing else. And, the center of the Selichot prayers is this 13 attributes of God, right? Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, right? This sort of very sort of aspirational way we want to perceive God, mirroring sort of the aspirational way we want to see ourselves. And only at night can we truly look at ourselves completely and honestly. During the day, we've got all the masks on and we've got the roles that we're playing, and we've got the titles that guard us, and we've got all the different coverings. And at night, it's kind of just us and God.
So let's take a moment and talk about that God, or that description of God. You sang it so nicely. The story comes from the middle of, or close to the end of the book of Exodus. The people of Israel, having come out of Egypt, crossed the Sinai desert, they meet God at Mount Sinai. They hear the voice of God, perceive the thunder and lightnings. Moses gives them the commandments. And then Moses tells them, I'm going up to the mountain. I'll be right back. Goes up to the mountain 40 days to get God's commandments. And while he's there, they succumb to their fear. They succumb to their worry. And they say to Aaron, make us a god, because that guy Moshe, he ain't coming down. So he builds them a golden calf. Moses is sent back down by God, confronts this golden calf, confronts his brother, confronts this sinful people, destroys the calf. And God says, look, I can't go with you anymore. I'll send an angel. I'll send a messenger. But I can't live in your midst anymore because you're an evil people. You're a sinful people.
Right. God wants to send a plague.
Yeah. And Moshe then says, if you don't go, I don't go. If you won't go with us, we're going to stay right here until we all perish here in the wilderness. And God does something amazing. God changes God's mind. It's okay, I'll go with you. And at that moment, Moshe says, that's bizarre, because great kings, great rulers, great despots don't change their minds, not in public anyway. And here is a God who says, okay, I'll forgive. I'll have compassion. And Moshe says to God, who are you? Show me your glory.
Right.
Show me your essence. Show me who you are. Right. And God says, you can't see me, you'll die, but I'll tell you what, I'll put you here in a mountain. I'll walk by, you'll see me as I pass by. And the next thing the Torah doesn't tell us what he saw. It has this description, Adonai, Adonai, God, God, El Rachum V'Chanun, a loving and merciful God, Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emes, a God who is patient, long-suffering, patient God, who embraces truth, right? And goes on to give this notion of a God of compassion. So what does this mean to you? What are we being taught in this self-revelation of a compassionate God?
Well, as you were saying the story, I sort of got lost in it because I just love your storytelling, and I forgot how much I miss it when I'm not with you every week. So for all our listeners, I just really am happy to be back. But when God says this is on the heels of God being so cruel, right? God's up there on Mount Sinai saying to Moses, these are a stiff-necked people. I should draw a plague on them. This is the same God who put Noah on the boat and destroyed the world. This is the same God that turned Lot's wife into a pillar of salt. This is the God who has a lot of anger issues and actually exacts punishment. So for Moses to notice in this moment that God changes his mind, there's something, this is one of my favorite parts of the Torah, because God is saying, this is who I really want to be. I'm not there yet, but I'm in process. And the end of the verse that we cut off, that we don't say, is that God will still punish the third and fourth generations, which is funny that the liturgist cut it off, because we don't want to know from that God. We want to know from the God who really wants to be good, just like we want to be good. And so it's a very aspirational text, and it also recognizes that God is not perfect and that God changes his mind. And I love that. I mean, I think for me, Eddie, if God were perfect, I don't think there'd be anything to relate to. Like, I don't think there would be any way to really truly connect, right? What we connect to God or other people is their intricacies, their web of character flaws, and their web of things that are contradictory, right? That the same quality that can be so powerful, being strong-willed, can also be your enemy. That's where we connect with people, right? What we love someone the most is what we hate about them. And what this text is saying is God is as complex as we are. I think it's very powerful.
And see that I would just put it slightly different. It's not
Okay.
that God isn't perfect. It's that God's perfection is not static.
Yes.
God isn't Aristotle's unmoved mover. This God who sits, it's a static kind of thing. What we're being shown in the Tanakh and the Bible is a God who is growing, a God who is aspirational, a God who is in process, because we are in process. Because
This is process theology, right? We're in process. God is in process. As we're shaped, God is shaped, and God is shaped by us, because of us, in spite of us, and everything in between. Right?
Right. And we worship a God who is in process. We worship a God who is growing. We worship a God who, like us, is reaching toward even a higher ideal of perfection, a higher ideal of goodness. And we can do the same thing, which is a wonderful Yom Kippur thought, by the way, because the idea is that what you are isn't nearly as important as where you're going.
And what you potentially can become. But you can see why a lot of Jews don't like this notion of God, right? This is not a finite, vertical, fixed notion of God. This is a God that is very moving and transient. And that, I think, for many Jews, as you and I both know, is really hard.
Right.
It's hard to think of God like that.
Well,
it's
you
much
find it
easier.
Even in the Bible. So I've always argued that the Bible is written in dialogues the same way that the Talmud is. You just have to be a better reader.
And I love that.
And I think that the other text that we can point to, which is a very classic Yom Kippur text, is the book of Jonah. Because what happens in the book of Jonah? There's this guy named Jonah, and he's told, go to Nineveh, which is the capital of the Assyrian Empire. And the Assyrians, northern Mesopotamians, attacked and destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel, humiliated the southern kingdom of Israel. And God says, I'm going to destroy them because they're evil.
Right. These are bad people.
They're bad people. And Jonah's, I want you to go and get them to repent so I don't have to destroy them. And Jonah doesn't want that God. He wants justice. He wants these guys to get it. And he's delighted that God's going to destroy him. And he's afraid that if he goes and he does his prophetic mission, he'll get him to repent and God will forgive him. And that's exactly what happened. Jonah runs away. He gets swallowed by a fish, 3 days in the belly of the whale. In the fish, he comes out of the fish. He goes to Nineveh. It's a very funny joke, actually, because the book of Isaiah is 66 chapters long. The book of Jeremiah is 58 chapters long. Nobody ever repented. Jonah says 4 words to Nineveh. He says, 40 days, Nineveh's toast, and the whole kingdom repents. Everybody repents. Wow. And God says, good, I don't have to destroy him. And Jonah gets upset, gets mad, says, I hate that about you.
Right, and it's so unjust.
He actually says the words that you mentioned, the words Adonai, Adonai, Rahum, but he says them with a sense of bitterness and irony. I knew you were compassionate. I knew you were weak. I knew you were loving. I knew you were forgiving. Who wants you? He says this to God.
Right, because Jonah's so upset in that moment because he wants what our lower, right, he wants revenge. He wants justice served, right? He wants, I call it the basement and the penthouse. The basement is, I want revenge. The penthouse is, I want to take the high road. And that's why you said something in your Shema article that I just read, and I hope you'll share it with other people. And I know it's out there in the journal about the belly of the whale that I was really touched by. Will you repeat that?
Well, so the guy doesn't want to go on his mission because, as you said, he wants mechanical justice. He doesn't want a God who's loving and caring. And what's ironic, of course, is that if God was as mechanically just and mechanically revengeful as Jonah is, as vengeful as Jonah is, Jonah would be dead. Right?
Exactly.
The only reason he's alive is because God has mercy on him. So
right, because he was in the whale.
He goes to the whale. And the whale is as far away from God as you can get, because it's not whale, by the way, it's a fish. Pinocchio is the whale, but that's okay. And so you think about, like, what's a whale? Like, what's it like to be eaten by a whale or by a fish, right? It's dark and it's wet and it's smelly. So that could be the grave. That could be the womb. That could be a tomb. It's such an interesting image. And that's God's classroom. You want to live in a world where there is absolute justice and no mercy, no compassion, no growth, no reaching farther than the circle of my own people, but farther into the world. You want to live in a closed world? I'll show you what a closed world looks like.
I
That's
just loved
God's
that.
classroom.
I read that when you said it was God's classroom, and this idea that a classroom can be a tomb or it can be a womb, right? It can be a place of growth or it can be a place of death. Really, like literally shook something in me because don't make a face, but like this idea that a classroom, that God's classroom can be based on you. It can be the exact same location, but what you do with it is what it can teach you, right? If it's a womb, it teaches you how to grow. If it's a tomb, it teaches you how to die.
And so here what happens is Jonah is the opposite of Moses. Moses embraces this idea of a God of compassion and a God who is growing in compassion. And that becomes his truth. That's the truth that Moses is going to come and teach us. The purpose of your life is to grow in compassion, to open the circle of love.
Yes, but Moses started out as a much more humble human being.
Yeah, a much smaller human being.
Right?
Yeah.
Moses was coming from a place of, as we say, like a lowly place to a high place, like in the Pesach Seder, we go from low to high. Moses was much more insignificant. And so I think Moses's perspective was, if I can grow and become, then why not God? I think Jonah, it's the opposite. It's like, this is a fair and just world. You've got to behave by my rules. And if those are not sufficient, then you need to go. You need to leave the room. Right?
Right.
And it makes sense.
My loyalties, my loyalties define me, and I want them to define God. And that makes God into an idol, because God then becomes a projection of my prejudice and a projection of my narrowness and a projection of my rage. You worship a God who looks like you. That's an idol. That's the definition of idolatry.
Did you ever think God looked like you, Eddie?
No, God forbid.
I did.
God, but see, that's I'm working on my high holiday teaching, and one of the things that I'm thinking about a lot about is that we can't see God, but we can hear the voice of God. So the imagination it's not visual, it's oral. It's the voice of God. Moses hears the voice of God say, compassion, patience, love, forgiveness. Those are the words that Moses incorporates into his self, but that becomes the God within him and the God he then shares with us.
Right. Just like the world is animated by words, so too God is animated by words.
Yeah, it's a wonderful.
Right. It's beautiful. But when I was a kid, I think I said this once before, but I was very short. I just didn't have like my growth spurt till much later in life. And they said, we're made B'Tselem Elohim. And I kept thinking, God is so short. God is so short. And I think about it all the time. I must have been, young, 9 or 8 or 9, something like that. And I just thought, God is very short. For all this talk about he's this big man with a big beard, I kept thinking, I wonder if he has a Napoleon complex. I mean, just short. And only when I grew, obviously, did I stop, and intellectually grew, then I stopped realizing God is not a projection of myself. But when I was young, I mean, they kept saying it over and over again. B'Tselem Elohim, B'Tselem Elohim. I mean, every Hebrew school Israeli teacher would say that to me.
No, but I like this idea that God represents the aspirational side of our humanity. That God is growing, God is dynamic, God is a process of expanding love and compassion, and that's the direction that God demands of us.
And God can change his mind or her mind or whatever you want to call it. But that idea that we are in growth and God is in growth allows us a lot of room to give ourselves second chances. Right. And I think I've been thinking a lot about that this high holidays. Like, we've been a little hard on ourselves and each other. And what does it look like to give each other second chances? I kind of feel like, circling back to Selichot, I feel like that's so much of it. is in the depth of that individual darkness on Selichot. Even though you're in a community, you sort of start the holiday alone a little bit. And you sort of reflect on, what have I done? Before I join the whole communal experience, what do I need to really look at on my own and my behaviors that are in need of growth?
Yeah, there's this wonderful custom among specifically the Bratslaver Chassidim of hitbodedut, which means isolation. It's an isolated meditation. And the Bratslavers would, in every night of the month of Elul, the month of before Yontif, would go out at midnight, each chassid on his own, and find a quiet spot in the forest all by himself, and shout out his prayers, and shout out his frustrations, and shout out the things he wanted, the places he wanted God's forgiveness. And it's a really interesting, psychological move. It's a sort of therapy, right? And I've known people that have actually tried this, and they find it actually very therapeutic. A friend of mine says, I can't do it in the forest. I don't live near a forest. I do it in my car when I'm on the freeway. I just talks to God out loud. But it occurs to me that we've had hitbodedut now for 2.5 years, that social distancing has enforced a kind of isolation on all of us. And what we're craving now is the opposite. We're craving dvekut. We're craving coming back together and becoming cleaving, right? And bonding together and seeing each other and sharing with you, like, how have you been these last 2.5 years? What have you been doing? And this might be that not just the first holiday we're back together, but the first holiday we might not have to wear masks. We see each other's faces and look into each other's eyes and give each other hugs and come back together as a
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people are like, are you going to shul? Are you not going to shul? Like, it used to be a non-negotiator. Are you going to shul on the high holidays? And now people are like, are you going? Are you not going? And I think it's more about the fear of seeing people again. I've got to look at you in the eyes. And they've been doing these studies. Please don't quote me on where they are, but I've been reading about it. And please, if someone quotes me, I'll have to look it up and then I'm gonna have to send you. But it's like these babies that were born in the pandemic aren't as comfortable being as social. They call them pandemic babies, right? And I think a lot of people's apprehension about coming back to shul is not out of COVID fears, but of those fears of, I got to look people back in the eye. And what I want to say to people more than anything is, like, when you do, you will think, how was I ever fearful before? Because that feeling of being connected and looking someone in the eye is so powerful that you can't imagine that you even doubted it before.
But you have it right. But let's go back over it one more time.
Please.
There is a moment of vulnerability.
For sure.
Right? I look in your eye, and for one thing, I said, you remember who I am? And there's a moment of risk there, because you might not remember who I am. And I might think that you're closer to me than you think I'm closer to you. And do you like me? And do you accept me? And are you prepared to share the world with me? And I think that's the fear. And I recognize that fear. That's a legitimate fear.
Oh, I think it's very legit. And actually, I think the whole world should be wearing name tags. I think it would be such a better world. I really believe every day of our life, we should all be wearing name tags. And it would make a softer, kinder world, because forgetting people's names is awkward, especially if you've been going to shul together for 20 years and then you haven't seen each other for 2+ years. It's reasonable to forget their names. I mean, I forgot what I ate for breakfast this morning, right? And if we were just all wearing name tags, that would even if someone was about to rob you, you'd be like, wait, hold on one second.
You're Bob.
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 Really? Is your mom good with
You're
this?
Bob.
Right. Like, Bob.
We went to high school together. Right?
Yes. I don't think this fits your personality. I don't think your mother would feel good about this.
Right.
Yeah, I think it would just make a kinder, softer world. I mean,
all right, so this is the season of confession. I'm going to make a confession, and our friends who are listening, listen carefully. Okay. First of all, I'm really bad remembering names. I sort of remember my children's names, but I often call them by the dog's name, and people come up to a congregational rabbi like me all the time, and they assume that I know who they are, right? Or sometimes they'll play a little game, which is, hi, Rabbi, do you remember me? And the truth of the matter is, I don't. or I remember your face, but I don't remember how I know you, right? And then they'll tell you, oh, 28 years ago, you were at my kid's bar mitzvah.
Well,
And
I just
so
have to
please,
tell everybody, there's this crazy thing that people believe that rabbis have magical powers, that they intuitively know what happened in your life during that week. They intuitively know your name, even if you haven't seen them in 35 years. They intuitively know that when you were officiating a wedding of 600 people, that you were sitting 3 rows from the back, but you remember that they were there. And it's not a judgment, but it's a educational moment. Let's say it's a teaching moment, that rabbis are people and we just don't remember. And it's not because we don't care about you. It's not because we don't love you. It's not because we don't hold you dear in our hearts. It literally, when there's 650 people and you're officiating a wedding up at the chuppah, you're thinking of one thing: how do I make this moment entirely significant for the 2 people standing in front of me and their friends and family? You're not thinking, how do I know that guy in the back row? Right? Like, you just aren't. And
so please come up to us
and
and
say,
say, hi, I'm Ed. I was at the wedding of the Goldfarb wedding, and I really enjoyed what you did. Or I really liked your sermon. Or don't you think those Dodgers are good this year? And just introduce yourself that way. And that makes it so much easier for me to love you,
Well, I do that all the time. Wherever I go, no matter what, I introduce myself because it's part of my name tag theory. Because I really feel like this expectation, especially post-pandemic, that we really recognize and know each other. And we're not the same. I mean, we're talking about God in process. We're not the same people we were 3 years ago. And I have a 12-year-old, almost a 13-year-old in my house. We're coming up on bar mitzvah. It's so exciting. But we went from him being in the 3rd grade to him being in the 6th grade. And we went to the graduation for the 6th graders. I kept saying to Levi, I don't know who that kid is. And he'd be like, Mom, are you insane? That's da 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 da. And each time he'd look at me like I was silly. He had been on the video with them and he watched them grow. But if you watch a 9-year-old go from 9 to 12, they look like an entirely different human being.
Right.
And that external change is what happened to us internally. And so it's so interesting because one of the kids, I swear he must have grown a foot. And he looked at me, he said, hi, Rabbi Hirsch. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know this kid. And then that kid has been at my house no less than 100 times. It's just that he had grown a foot. He looked like a different kid. He went from being a little tiny boy to being on the verge of teenagehood.
And all of us went through that.
Yes. And some of it's more visible when you're 9 to 12, but it's not visible when you're 50 to 53.
So one of the things I think would be a really nice gesture for all of us who are getting ready for the holidays now, if you happen to know somebody who either isn't planning on coming to the holiday service at the synagogue, any synagogue, or is on the fence about it, give them a call and invite them. Give them a call and just say, look, I know it's hard for you, but I'm going. I'll meet you at the door at 10 o'clock. We'll come in together. We'll sit together. If you're uncomfortable, we can sit in the back. We can sit outside. But I think, this year in particular, it's very important for our souls. And I'll be honest, it's very important for the synagogue world that we all come back together to celebrate these holidays. And I think it's everybody's responsibility to call and say, look, I hope you're coming, because it'll mean a lot to me to be with you.
Eddie, I can't emphasize that enough. And I'm not a pulpit rabbi, so I can say it with a little bit of a different angle, but the amount of fear that people feel, and I hear it, when someone calls them and says, hey, just come with me, I have an extra ticket, or you don't even need a ticket, just come. Walking in is hard. Walking in is hard, and people forgot that. And we were so accustomed to walking in and walking out with such ease, and people forgot how to do it. And to walk in with someone by your side is a totally different experience. I also am doing this thing this year.
Yeah.
I just have to share with you.
Please.
I always try to bring the fun, because I like to bring the fun. I'm going to do candied apples and have everybody take their apples and dip them in honey and caramel and all kinds of like M&Ms, just to make like a caramel apple bar, just to kind of shake it up a little bit. There's nobody that doesn't like those things. I mean, they're not great for your teeth, but I think anything like that, inviting people over and saying, you don't have to be dressed, you don't have to be, just come be yourself. I'll meet you at the front door. We don't have to stay for the whole time. Give people a lot of latitude and room to walk back in at their own pace, but with you by their side.
Oh, that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful, beautiful idea. So Sherry, let's finish with a little bit of a Yontif greeting, as it were. You've talked about so many ways to get ready for the holiday. Give us one more. Caramel apples are beautiful, by the way.
Isn't that cute? I love it. I'm so excited about it.
Save me one.
Of course.
Caramel and walnuts, yeah.
Do what? Wait, what? I need to know.
Caramel, walnuts, or pecans, yeah. Almonds, yeah, and nuts.
You're like my husband. He likes the pecans.
I want a spiritual note. How can I get my soul ready for this holiday?
So I have a practice that I do every day. And during Elul, it's a little deepened. And I want to share it with you. So I put the phone by it used to be that I had to pick up a phone and put it next to my bed, but now I just take my phone and I put it next to my bed and I actively review my day. Like I do this every night. It takes about 15 minutes maximum. I sort of look at my calendar and say, like, what happened today? Oh, I taught, I had a meeting with this, I dropped the kids off, we had a good conversation, whatever. I kind of go through the day and I see if there's anything unfinished. Like maybe that conversation didn't get finished, or maybe that's still left unspoken, or maybe I said something that was a little unfiltered or a little unedited. And I take then a few minutes and I respond to that person and I finish it. And now more than ever, I used to do it not every day, but I used to do it frequently. Now more than ever, I do it every night. And I think during the holidays, it's a time to start a practice like that. Decide to do it just on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, or the 7 days from Selichot to, not 7, sorry, from Selichot, from Saturday night to Rosh Hashanah. It's more like 9 days. But to really take a moment each day to say, what's unfinished? Not in the big things. Oh my God, I got to heal the relationship with my great grandmother's brother, sister, but just as a practice. Sometimes it's easier to finish things that are small than to finish the big things. And by practicing finishing the small, it leads us to finish the big.
That's wonderful. That's really, really
You?
wonderful. Well, I've been thinking a lot. We came up with a motto for the holidays here, because of course we have a new rabbi that we're working with, and sharing, learning with him, and a new cantor that we're delighted to welcome.
Lots of excitement over there at VBS.
It is a lot. It's beautiful.
We love being members.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And so the motto is Or Chadash Al Tzion Ta'ir, a new light shines upon Zion and upon us all. And it occurs to me that this notion of a new thing, the Hasidic tradition has many names for God. And one of the ones that I think is remarkable is God is called Hamichadesh, the source of the new. And, it takes a great deal of creativity and sometimes courage to come up with something new, something that you haven't done before, something that's a new field, a new area, a new interest, a new relationship. And so I think that part of what I'm doing is meditating on, okay, what's new? What in the world is new that's asking for my investment at this point? New relationships, new friendships that I haven't had a chance to really make. And now I want to try that, and new things I want to learn. I always try to find a topic that I want to learn. The way I learn is I teach. So I have to find what I want to teach this year, because whatever I teach I have to go learn it first. So I'm looking for something new, a new topic or a new area to teach and to learn. And then, a couple of other a new recipe to bring to my kitchen, and a new, something new to bring to life, so that I can dedicate my new year and say to God, listen, I know that my last year was a little tough, but this new year is going to be worth it. Give me life, because I want to invest in something really new and find great excitement and happiness. So that's how I'm preparing. And I
love that. And I love the phrase Titchadshi, enjoy the newness.
You become new.
You become new.
You become new too. So
Yeah.
Sherry, thank you so much for joining. We hope we continue our conversations. I want to wish everybody a very, very good Shabbos following this, of course, service from Valley Beth Shalom. Tonight is Selichot. Come by the synagogue for ice cream. That's an old VBS tradition.
I was going to say, I forgot we have ice cream on
We have
Selichot at
ice cream on
VBS.
Selichot. We start with sin and we end with sin. So
Yeah,
you start with an ice cream
I actually
sundae and
think
enjoy.
ice cream is a blessing, but okay, we can debate that.
No. It's a big blessing. It is
Yeah,
until you
it's
go
not a
home and
sin.
say, why did I have come and have some ice cream and enjoy beautiful musical Selichot with Cantor Raffi and Cantor Barron, Cantor Fox, and Rabbi Leibowitz tonight. Enjoy that. And then this coming week, let's get ready for the holiday. And we'll do Torah study next week, and we'll be talking directly about Rosh Hashanah. And maybe we'll have Rabbi Gelman come back and join us. So
I hope
Sherry,
so.
a happy, healthy, sweet New Year for you and your kids.
Thank you. You too, Eddie.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.